In the middle of Chaco Canyon's largest great house stands a room the size of a closet. Its walls run about 6 feet. A man inside can touch 2 at once. Beneath its floor lay 2 men, sealed under a covering of wooden planks. On top of those planks, over 3 centuries, 12 more were laid down. 14 bodies, 1 closet. And with the 2 underneath was more turquoise than in all the other Chacoan sites combined. Not more than any single site, more than all of them together. Which leaves the question this canyon never answered: who decided who was allowed inside? Chaco Canyon lies in the high desert of northwestern New Mexico, a dry seam of rock and sand under an enormous open sky. 3 things about that small room are worth waiting for, and each one turns this story further than the one before it. The first is that every person read out of that room shared a single bloodline, and it was traced through the mothers. The second is that the people who finally proved who those bodies were held no archaeology degrees between them at all. And the third is happening right now, a few miles from the canyon wall, in an office in Santa Fe. The building is called Pueblo Bonito. At its height, it held hundreds of rooms and rose 4 stories at the back. Serious excavation began there in 1896, paid for by 2 wealthy brothers named Hyde and directed from New York. The fieldwork itself fell to a young man from the American Museum of Natural History, a curator named George Pepper. Room 33 looked unremarkable from the doorway. Small, square, plastered, one of several hundred rooms in a complex that size. Crews had been clearing rooms just like it for weeks, turning up broken pottery, corn cobs, and drifted desert sand. Then, working down through the sand of that particular floor, they stopped finding household debris and started finding people. Grave stacked on grave, in a space crossed in 2 steps. Picture the moment that room was closed for the first time, somewhere in the late 800s of our era. Hands laying boards across 2 bodies, 1 plank set against the next, until the floor above them reads as solid ground. Perhaps whoever did it expected to return within a season. In fact, that room stayed in use for 300 more years. The burials above the planks were scattered and disturbed, with bones pushed aside to make room for whoever came next. The 2 beneath were untouched, so everyone who kept using that room knew what lay under its floor and left it alone. The lower of those 2 men is known in the excavation records by a plain working label with no ceremony in it, Burial 14. He died around the year 880, at the point when this canyon was becoming the center of the entire region. He was, in the words of the researchers, likely killed by a blow to the head. Whether that made him a casualty, an offering, or something this canyon has no surviving word for, the evidence does not say. It is worth holding on to that detail, though, because of who was laid beside him in the centuries afterward. What surrounded him is not in dispute at all: turquoise, cut and drilled and strung, in quantities that stop the eye. Shell carried in from the Pacific coast, hundreds of miles west. A flute, ceramic vessels set carefully around the body. It is the richest burial ever found in the American Southwest, and the archaeologists who say so are careful with that sentence. Richer graves exist further south, in Mesoamerica and in Peru, and nobody working at Chaco pretends otherwise for a moment. Which is exactly what makes this one strange. The wealth is not really the puzzle here. The room around it is the puzzle, and it has never been solved. Why come back, for 3 centuries, to 1 closet in the middle of a building the size of a small town? Those 3 centuries are not an estimate drawn from pottery styles. They come from the bones themselves, measured through radiocarbon dating. Carbon inside living tissue decays at a known and steady rate, so a bone carries a rough clock of its owner's death. Run that clock across every skeleton in the room, and the dates spread across roughly 300 years of continuous use. The same closet, generation after generation, while the great house around it was built, extended, torn back and rebuilt again. 9 generations of somebody's family. In 2017, a team led by Douglas Kennett went a step further and read the DNA still held inside the bone. Mitochondrial DNA passes from a mother to all of her children, and only her daughters carry it forward to the next generation. That makes it, in effect, a signature of the maternal line, handed down unchanged, while everything else in a family reshuffles. 9 of the 14 bodies still held DNA that was readable after more than 1,000 years in the dry ground. All 9 of them carried the same rare signature, a variant found almost nowhere else in the ancient Southwest. Not a village, not a class, one family, through the mothers. The nuclear genomes narrowed the picture further still, down to relationships that anyone alive today would recognize instantly. Among those burials, the team identified a mother and her daughter, and a grandmother and her grandson, lying in the same room. None of that was inferred from pottery styles or from the shape of the walls. It was read directly out of the bodies. And here the honest line has to be drawn carefully, because this is the point where the story usually gets stretched. It does not mean that women ruled Chaco Canyon. It means that status here was inherited through the mother's blood. Who actually made the decisions in this canyon, who spoke and who was obeyed, the science simply does not say. The DNA gives a bloodline, not a throne. For most of the last century, these builders were called the Anasazi, a word carried into English out of Navajo. Their descendants prefer the name ancestral Puebloans, and that is the name this investigation will use from here on. Because those descendants are not a theory or a maybe. They are here today, in pueblos, across New Mexico and Arizona. That is worth stating plainly, given the kind of titles that fill the search results whenever this canyon and its dead come up. No lost race built Pueblo Bonito. No visitors from somewhere else. No secret that the tribes are keeping from anybody. Native Americans built it on their own land. What genuinely remained open was a far narrower question than any of that, and a considerably harder one to answer honestly. Which living people, specifically, descend from the family buried in that one room? For decades, that question sat between cultural memory on one side and cautious scientific silence on the other, with little crossing between them. The Pueblos themselves had always answered it the same way, without hedging and without qualification. Our ancestors were there. If this is the kind of history worth an hour of the week, subscribing keeps these investigations coming. In 2025, the question was finally settled, and not by archaeologists. Picuris Pueblo is a small community in the mountains of northern New Mexico, a long way from the canyon floor. Its leaders approached the geneticists themselves and asked for a study of their own ancestry to be carried out properly. Not as the subjects of somebody else's research, as the party that started it and could halt it at any point. 16 ancient members of the community were sequenced, alongside 13 people living in the Pueblo today, spanning the last 1,000 years. The tribe held the data itself, set the terms of its use, and kept the decision about publishing entirely in its own hands. The result went further than anyone had expected. No sampled population anywhere, past or present, is closer to the ancient people of Chaco Canyon than Picuris Pueblo. And one living member of that community carries the same rare maternal signature as the burials down in room 33. The Pueblo itself sits well over 100 miles from the canyon, across a mountain range and a wide river valley. Picture an elder reading through a laboratory report that his own community had commissioned, funded, and kept control of throughout. It confirms, in the language of genetics, something his people had been saying for as long as anyone there could remember. We have always been here. The leadership was entirely open about why they wanted that answer now, rather than leaving it to some later decade. Not for the journals, for standing a documented voice in whatever happens next to the land around Chaco Canyon. In 2023, a federal order closed a 10-mile buffer around the park to any new drilling and mining. It covers 336,000 acres of public land, and it was written to hold for the next 20 years. This July, the Bureau of Land Management put forward an assessment that proposes removing that buffer from the map altogether. Public comment closed on the 29th. Tribal leaders gathered outside the agency office in Santa Fe that same day, and the state attorney general filed a formal objection. The wider landscape already holds tens of thousands of oil and gas wells, and most of its available acreage is under lease. How that ends is not settled yet, and it is not this investigation's place to settle it either. What is settled is the room. 14 people, one family line, 300 years. And descendants still standing on the same ground, now arguing for the quiet above it.